People assume that they just kind of drilled everything into me and taught me everything, but Dad taught me that for drums, and from there I taught myself.
As Wolfgang Van Halen continued forward, something subtle but powerful began to happen. The conversation around him slowly changed. At first, every headline mentioned his father before his own name, but over time, people began talking about his work, his sound, and his presence without needing a comparison. That shift didn't happen overnight. It came from consistency, humility, and an almost stubborn commitment to doing things the right way rather than the easy way. Touring with Mammoth WVH became more than just performing songs from a debut album. It was a proving ground. Night after night, Wolfgang stepped onto stages knowing that many in the audience arrived curious, skeptical, or unsure. By the end of the set, that uncertainty often turned into respect. He didn't rely on spectacle. He relied on musicianship, energy, and authenticity. Every performance felt like a conversation with the crowd, a quiet statement that said, "This is who I am." Behind the scenes, he remained intensely self-critical. Success never softened his work ethic. He reviewed performances, refined arrangements, and constantly looked for ways to improve. He spoke openly about feeling pressure, not from others, but from himself. That pressure wasn't about living up to a famous name anymore. It was about living up to his own standards. What truly set Wolfgang apart was his refusal to rush. In an industry obsessed with instant results, he moved deliberately. He didn't flood the world with releases or chase trends. Instead, he treated music like craftsmanship. Each song mattered. Each lyric served a purpose. Each sound was intentional. Fans noticed that sincerity, and it became a defining part of his identity. As his confidence grew, so did his willingness to speak openly about challenges. He talked about self-doubt, about navigating public expectations, and about learning to tune out noise that didn't serve him. That honesty resonated deeply, especially with younger listeners who saw him not as a distant figure, but as someone genuinely figuring things out in real time. Another major turning point came when Mammoth WVH earned award recognition. The acknowledgement wasn't just about trophies or nominations. It symbolized acceptance. It meant his work was being evaluated on its own merits. For someone who spent years trying to separate identity from legacy, that moment carried enormous weight. Still, Wolfgang never distanced himself from where he came from. He spoke about his father often, not with sadness alone, but with gratitude. Stories of encouragement, humor, and quiet guidance surfaced in interviews. He made it clear that while he chose independence, the foundation his father gave him was invaluable. The difference was that he built upon it rather than leaning on it. As time went on, Wolfgang became more comfortable in his public voice. Early interviews were cautious, measured, and reserved. Later ones revealed a sharper wit, confidence, and even playful sarcasm. He learned how to navigate media without compromising himself. He didn't chase approval, and ironically, that made people admire him more. Collaborations also expanded his reach. Working with artists across genres exposed him to new creative approaches and audiences. Each collaboration was chosen carefully. He wasn't interested in novelty. He wanted chemistry. That mindset kept his work grounded and authentic, even as his profile grew. His songwriting evolved as well. Early tracks carried a sense of proving something. Later songs felt more reflective, more personal, and more expansive. Themes of identity, perseverance, connection, and self-belief began to surface more clearly. Without forcing vulnerability, he allowed it to emerge naturally through melody and tone. Live shows continued to be a defining strength. Wolfgang didn't hide behind backing tracks or excessive production. What audiences saw was real. Mistakes, if they happened, were owned rather than concealed. That transparency created trust. Fans didn't feel like they were watching a performance crafted for perfection. They felt like they were sharing an experience. Away from the stage, Wolfgang's life found balance. Marriage brought stability, grounding him during periods of intense travel and creative pressure. He spoke about how important it was to have someone who understood both the demands of his career and the person he was outside of it. That support system allowed him to take creative risks without feeling untethered. As his career entered its next phase, Wolfgang began thinking more long-term. He wasn't just focused on the next album or tour. He thought about sustainability, growth, and impact. What kind of artist did he want to be 10 or 20 years down the line? What kind of work would he be proud to look back on? Those questions led him to experiment more, both musically and professionally. He became more involved in production decisions, visual concepts, and creative direction. Rather than delegating everything, he immersed himself in the entire process. That hands-on approach ensured his vision remained intact. At the same time, he became more comfortable setting boundaries. He learned when to say no, when to step back, and when to protect his mental space. That maturity didn't come from fame, but from experience. He understood that longevity required balance, not burnout. Fans often commented on how relatable he felt despite his background. He engaged online with humor and honesty, never positioning himself above others. He pushed back against unrealistic narratives, reminding people that progress is rarely linear. That message resonated deeply in a world obsessed with overnight success stories. As the years passed, comparisons to his father became less frequent and less intense. Not because people forgot the legacy, but because Wolfgang established his own. The music spoke for itself. The performances spoke for themselves. The work ethic spoke louder than any label ever could. Looking back, the journey wasn't about escaping a shadow. It was about learning how to stand comfortably in light that was uniquely his. Wolfgang Van Halen didn't reject his heritage. He redefined what it meant. He proved that honoring the past and building the future don't have to be opposing goals. Today, he stands as an artist shaped by legacy but driven by individuality. Someone who respects history without being trapped by it. Someone who understands that true success isn't measured by comparison, but by authenticity and growth. And the story is far from over. With every new project, every performance, and every risk taken, Wolfgang continues to evolve. Not as a symbol of something inherited, but as a creator in his own right, writing chapters that belong entirely to him. People often assume everything was handed to him, that every lesson was drilled into him from day one, but that was never the case. He once explained that his dad showed him the basics on drums, and from that point forward he mostly taught himself. That mindset would shape everything that followed. Wolfgang Van Halen, the son of rock icon Eddie Van Halen, surprised fans and industry insiders alike by stepping out from one of the biggest shadows in music history and proving that his story was his own. Born into a legendary family, expectations followed him everywhere, yet instead of being defined by them, he transformed pressure into purpose. At first, the world knew him simply as Eddie Van Halen's son, but over time it became clear that Wolfgang was determined to carve his own path, not only musically but personally as well. Born in 1991, Wolfgang entered a world surrounded by sound, creativity, and famous faces. His father changed the course of rock guitar forever, while his mother, Valerie Bertinelli, was a beloved television star. Even so, his childhood was surprisingly grounded. Music filled the house, but fame was never the focus. Wolfgang grew up like any other kid, surrounded by family, laughter, and routine. That balance shaped him. He didn't grow up chasing attention or validation. Instead, he developed a quiet determination and a genuine love for music itself. From an early age, instruments felt natural to him. One of the most memorable images from his childhood shows a small boy sitting behind a drum kit far too big for him, gripping the sticks with total concentration. The kit belonged to his uncle Alex, and even then, Wolfgang looked completely at home. Years later, he shared that photo, joking about sneaking in a jam session while wearing his winter boots. Music wasn't a performance to him, it was simply part of life. By the time he was 9, his interest in rhythm had turned into real discipline. His father showed him the fundamentals, but Wolfgang quickly took ownership of his progress. Watching his son lock into beats with confidence filled Eddie with pride, yet lessons were never forced. His parents encouraged exploration without pressure, allowing him to grow into music naturally rather than being pushed toward it. For a long time, Wolfgang didn't fully grasp how famous his dad really was. To him, Eddie was just Dad. That changed gradually as he got older and began noticing album covers and credits. One quiet moment in the studio became a turning point when he saw his father's name, face, and his own name tied to a musical legacy much bigger than he realized. That was when the scale of it all started to sink in. As he grew older, his curiosity expanded beyond drums to guitar, and his desire to write music intensified. Learning directly from a legendary guitarist wasn't always easy. His dad wasn't a traditional teacher. When Wolfgang asked how to play something, Eddie would simply gesture and say, "Do that," referring to his own flawless technique. It was frustrating and funny at the same time, and eventually, Wolfgang realized he needed to figure things out in his own way. So he did. He studied, practiced, experimented, and built his skills independently, determined to avoid becoming a copy of anyone, even his father. One meaningful exception came when Wolfgang prepared for a school talent show and wanted to perform a piece his father had written. That time, Eddie sat with him and guided him through it. It wasn't a lesson filled with instructions, but with connection. On stage, Wolfgang felt something click. That moment taught him that while independence mattered, the bond he shared with his father through music was irreplaceable. By the age of 15, Wolfgang's talent was undeniable. In 2006, his father made a bold decision that would change everything, inviting him to join Van Halen as the bassist. Many people questioned the move, assuming favoritism, but Eddie stood by his choice. He had seen Wolfgang's ability firsthand. When the band reunited for tour, the pressure was intense. Online criticism was relentless, and the weight of expectations felt overwhelming. Still, night after night, Wolfgang proved himself on stage, not with words, but with performance. As the years passed, he continued to grow, and in 2013 he made another surprising move by joining the band Tremonti. It was a clear statement that he wasn't limiting himself to one legacy. He took the role seriously, balancing commitments and pushing himself creatively. One night, he was asked to step in at the last possible moment, learning an entire set in a single session before heading out on tour. That moment symbolized everything about his journey: preparation meeting opportunity. Life wasn't without hardship. When his father faced serious health challenges, it deeply affected the family and the music world. Through it all, Wolfgang stayed strong, carrying lessons of resilience and love. Losing his father later became the most difficult chapter of his life. Grief didn't fade quickly, but music became his anchor. Memories of encouragement and shared moments pushed him forward when everything felt heavy. He spoke openly about how honoring his father meant continuing to live fully, to create, and to move forward with purpose. That purpose took shape in his debut album Mammoth WVH, released in 2021. He wrote every song and played every instrument himself. It was a massive risk, but also total creative freedom. The album represented years of effort, doubt, growth, and belief. Taking the music on the road was the next step, and naming the project Mammoth was a tribute to his father's early musical history, a respectful nod while still standing firmly on his own. His personal life flourished alongside his career. After years together, he married his longtime partner Andrea in an intimate ceremony at their home, surrounded by close family and friends. To honor his father, music written by Eddie played during the ceremony, turning the moment into both a celebration and a tribute. His mother spoke openly about the joy of seeing her son so happy and supported, confident he had found someone who truly understood him. Professionally, opportunities continued to grow. From award recognition to major film projects, Wolfgang reached audiences far beyond the rock world. Performing alongside legendary musicians and appearing on some of the world's biggest stages marked milestones he once only imagined. Each step confirmed what he had worked so hard to prove: he wasn't just carrying a famous name, he was building a legacy of his own. Today, Wolfgang Van Halen stands at a powerful intersection of past and future. He honors where he came from without being trapped by it. He creates honestly, performs fearlessly, and stays true to himself no matter the comparisons. His father once encouraged him to follow his own path, and those words continue to guide him. Now, people don't just see the name Van Halen. They hear Wolfgang's voice, his sound, and his story. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, subscribe, and click the next video on your screen to continue the journey.